This one's gonna be like a 3-part series. This is gonna be part 1 of the story. Here we go. A mile above hell. The first thing I always remember is the heat. Even when I could see nothing, hear nothing, even when my brain was trying to bury itself in the comfy, dark recesses of unconsciousness, my body was slowly being cooked sunny side down. I couldn't open my eyes, but I didn't want to anyway. I was tired. I had been unconscious. The heat was tolerable when I was asleep, and I really wanted to go back to sleep, like a tired kid burying his head into the pillow moaning. I don't want to go to school. My body, however, was slowly waking up on its own. I began to grow conscious of other stimuli. The lightweight cotton green uniform, the heavy combat boots, the open-ended gloves that protected my palms, but left my fingers to soil the suit on the melted asphalt. Something was missing now. Finally, I slowly opened my eyes, and the light and heat quickly slammed the doors again. I tried again after several minutes, but slower this time, and this time it was bearable. I was lying on something hot. A stretch of rough, black surface turned into a warped, bubbly scalded by heat. Some of it stuck to the black, pocketed vest that covered my torso to the knee pads and the toes of my boots. As my vision cleared further, I noticed more and more of the area beyond the black road. Dust swirled above me in dust devils. The heat was not just coming from the ground. The wind was like a dragon's breath, and it smelled of something burning, a bit of everything burning. Then came the pain. I say the pain because there was no one area of it. I felt as if I had been run over by a steamroller from head to foot. My hands were charred from lying on the ground. My body was a little better off, protected from direct heat by a couple layers of cotton and tactical vest pockets, but my skin was drenched by sweat. The inside of my clothes was a swamp, and my head, oh Jesus Christ, my head, only way to describe it is to imagine your head being put in a maraca with 10 pounds of bucket shot lead and going to Mexican New Year celebrations. It was terrible, and I wasn't even moving yet. There seemed to be a big blackness on the right side of my vision, and it came to me that I had only been seeing out of my left eye. The right side had not opened, or it wasn't there. I realized now that little could be a done line on my face, like a dead turtle, so I decided to attempt rolling onto my back and getting a somewhat better look about me. I knew already that this was going to hurt. Some of the melted asphalt had cold from my face touching it. It would be like ripping off duct tape, only a lot worse. Sorry. I prepared for blood knowing that the oily tar would not come off on its own, and I cannot lie here on my face all day. At first my arms didn't seem to work, just laying there like dry dropped eels. Then as it got more blood in them, the pain flowed in. It felt like it had been stretched, balled up, jackhammered, and mixed with water. It spread out alongside the asphalt. However, my arms are rather muscular and recovered quickly, planting my hands against the ground, my elbows reaching above my spine like a spider's leg. I braced myself for the pain and pushed, arching my spine. At first, my face resisted parting the ground, and the pulling of my skin caused a sharp discomfort. This was bliss compared with what happened next. Setting my neck and jaw, I yanked my head backwards and pushed up. There was a most nasty peeling noise, like them pulling apart two pieces of meat, which is not too far off. A tear or two, and warm red blood began to spurt onto the smoking tar. My face seized up from the utter agony, with several layers of my skin being yanked off. It made me glad I hadn't grown a beard or long hair, and might have lost my whole face at least. At least I was able to move. but the pain was making my vision flutter. Stabilizing myself, I rocked myself backwards so I was kneeling upright, and a steady tide of blood streaked down my neck to soak into my thick green spider coat. I knew now that before I could look around, I needed to find something to cover the wounds. Something was falling out of the sky, into my hair, building up on my shoulders and gear. It looked like dirty snow. Whatever it was, I needed to clean and dress my disfigured cheek immediately. I looked around me for some spare cloth, a medkit, a backpack, or a backpack for short, whatever. I had a large backpack on my shoulders. It matched my forest pattern uniform, probably my helmet too. Whatever that thing was, it was held across my chest. There's several buckles to keep it on my back, so I proceeded to undo them. And I then noticed a name tag on the left shoulder strap. Specialist for Austin Carver. It wasn't a name I recognized. My fingers were so blistered and sore, it was slow, hellish, undoing the three clasps by click. I was able to shrug the gear off. It fell with a thud into the dust, and I felt lighter, the strain of my back lessened. A couple more clamps, and the lay opened like a little cave. It was chock full of gear. Pouches on the outside held a canteen filled with lukewarm water. A couple tube-like grenades, more ammunition for my rifle, which also seemed to be missing like most of my hardware, and a radio. But the materials inside were enough for 3 men, and it was all mine. I quickly found ample medical supplies in the smaller red box. More pain was to come. I would have to dab some disinfectant onto my cheek before I patched it up. I stared at the dreaded brown bottle of hydrogen peroxide before gritting my teeth. Biting down on a piece of gauze before applying some to a cloth, I poised it over my cheek, bit the bullet, and pressed it to my face. Some pain is so bad it makes you lose control of some other parts of your body. I felt my fingers numb a bit, shaking like an electrical current was going through them, but my jaw dropped to a soundless scream as my face squeezed tight. Through it all, my fending cloth stayed over the wound. Finally, satisfied that the disinfectant had done its work, I threw the bloodstained item as far from me as possible, gasping for breath, and grabbed a clean gauze, folded it into a wad, and tapped it onto the wound before sweat and blood could remove that adhesive. I wrapped a bandage around my head, incapacitating my mouth, ears, in the back of my head. I can only imagine it looked like makeshift balaclava for someone in a mental institution. Especially when I had to cut a hole for my mouth to breathe through. Yeah, I remembered my right eye. When applying the bandage, I had felt a scaly surface over the right side of my head, along with an acute pain. Feeling it again, I rubbed it with my finger, and it came all dusty with something like rust. Dry blood somehow. My head had been injured, and blood had poured over my eye, hardened like a seal of wax. Taking a little more cloth, I damped it with water and rubbed at my eye. It came away red, but soon my right eye was open. Then I turned my attention to my aforementioned head wound. Gingerly, my head crept up my skull to the nexus of pain jolts. Suddenly, I found the problem. It was as if my hand were a car and it had suddenly driven off a cliff. A massive dent, more like a bomb crater, shaped like a spearhead, running about 4 inches along the dome of my head. It was no wonder I wasn't remembering much. There was serious damage up there. My stomach rumbled most audibly, and it felt shrunken. I patted my belly and noticed that there were some ribs showing before I shouldered the pack again. I felt some containers near the bottom of the bag, reading case for MRE. Were I in a more comfortable situation, I'm sure the rations inside would have been left where they were, but as I was, inhaled the food quicker than you would think possible. More of the dirty snow was falling as I shouldered my gear again and pushed my curiosity more. I needed to examine the environment beyond where I was. At the moment, I had slowly pieced together my surroundings. It seemed to be in a large hole, a foxhole perhaps, but there was an asphalt at the bottom. My thought was that maybe an earthquake had caused a part of the road to fall several feet into a fault. The sides were a steep mix of gravel, sand, and several huge fragments of metal beams. I could climb out, but it would be on all fours. Now that all my immediate issues had been cared for, it hit me like a thunderbolt, so sudden and profound, I nearly rocked back on my heels. Who am I? I hadn't recognized the name tag. Was it my own name? How did I get here? What's been happening? A dozen questions swarmed through my head so fast my knees buckled, and I ended up back where I had started 10 minutes ago. Suddenly, the slopes of the crater I was in became like walls, and they began to close in. A deep-seated panic set in, and my heart began to race. Blood oozed from my cheek and down my forehead as I clawed into the same hiding from me from the rest of the world. I dug into my toes and climbed furiously up the slope. And like a drowning man breaking the surface of the water, I emerged from the hole, gasping for air. I lay prone on the lip of the crater for a minute, my stress-induced claustrophobia bleeding away with all my head wounds. My hand gripped in the scorched sand like a lifeline. My head slowly came up again. I felt serious deja vu from an hour ago, when I had woken in the crater, mostly because I again was lying on my face, feeling like death. And looking up, the area I had now discovered was not much different from the smoking hole from which I had emerged. It was larger, more open, set on a softly sloped hillside leading to a peak. A road ran the length of it, disappearing over the top. Many structures lined both sides of the road, a lot of them on fire, some of them unrecognizable, reduced to splintered wood, crushed plaster, and scattered tiles. Everything had been sprawled into one direction, like a huge sledgehammer had hit the block and sent everything flying. What an ungodly mess. Some cars were lying on their backs like dead spiders. Some twisted or smelted into shapeless masses of steel and rubber. License plates had melted and cooled into shiny green stained icicles on the rear ends of the now dead machines. I tried to crawl forward, but a fainting noise and a sharp pain in my fingertips forced me to stop again. Shattered glass carpeted the ground in every direction. You could spit and not miss a shard. Now blood oozed from my fingers, and I was forced to dig into the back again. Fresh, warm blood smearing the green material. Soon my hands matched my rather grotesque head bandage. I must have looked quite a sight. My charred green uniform, all my gear, and these blaring white bandages, smeared with red stains, turned to a deep rusty brown. I stood up this time very shakily to save my fingers more damage and to let my tough boots deal with the glass. Now my head was brushing against a layer of smoke that was flowing parallel to the spread of wreckage that encompassed me. I became conscious of the smell again, only now it was much stronger, a witch's cauldron of ponds. I could not find one word for it. The clouds split for a moment, and the light poured onto the smoldering landscape. Something shone into my dazed right eye, which was still adjusting that, and I raised my bandaged hands to ease the flash. The sun was reflecting off a large piece of shiny metal, flat, protected from damage by a pile of rubble. It caught my attention firmly, and I felt the impressible need to investigate it. To touch it, I stumbled across the street, not bothering to look both ways. It hardly seemed the time to worry about the old common courtesies of times that seemed to have changed dramatically. Okay, this is part 1 of the story. I'll do part 2 today, and part 3 today. Yeah, bye.